Hello and welcome to Share.Care's What is Manly radio show and podcast. Men feel more lonely, lost, and not useful in society than ever in history. Males are not attaching to school, work, or women. What it means to be a man appears lost. Is there a framework for being manly that we can unearth?
Welcome to Share.Care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.Care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.Care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello, Mark and Grace. How are you today?
We're good.
We are great. Good day.
Yeah, well, you must be great. We're talking the pre-show, how you've just got the kids off to school. That's got to be a great feeling. You've got three kids, haven't you? Is that right?
Four.
Four. Oh,
Yes.
wow. I thought it was warm in Florida. No. For the
But
audience,
we got air conditioning and that kind of stuff.
for the audience, I've got Mark and Grace here from Sais from Florida. They are the founders of the Noble Notary and Legal Document Preparers. And they're also the authors of two books, The Golden Pen, a Notary Signing Agent's Guide to Multiple Streams of Income, and A Digital Pen, a Loan Signing Agent's Guide to Starting a Remote Online Notary Business. And that was last time we talked. No doubt you guys have been very busy with other activities as well.
We have, yeah. We just launched a directory for notaries, as you can imagine, or people kind of in that legal service space. So that just rolled out like a month ago. Same thing. It's kind of, I think, as we progress through this industry, we just start looking at it instead of just like our business right here. We start looking at it bigger picture as a whole. Like, okay, how can we affect the industry as a whole, and how can we create win-wins for other notaries as well, or other people kind of in this space?
I really love the way that you operate from that perspective, because you're not, it's all about me and I'm going to protect myself. But you're actually helping other people, and which is a strange way for most people would find that difficult to operate. Do you find that, more helpful from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. You wanna answer
Well,
that?
I mean, I feel like we know we've been through everything, so we want to assist people as much as we can because why not share the wisdom and the wealth with other people? So I feel like it's easy to do. It's just become this natural progression for us to just expand and expand, but just be, hands-on with as many people as we can and just try to help as many people as we can.
Yeah, I love that. I love the way you operate. From that perspective, it's sharing that knowledge and not being fearful, but actually boldly going out there. I sound like I'm Star Trek now, but going out there and helping other people. Which in today's world, I think, ever since the Industrial Revolution, when we created, where innovation has created a bigger pie as such, we're no longer in a zero-sum game where if you wanted to have more, someone else had to have less. But we're in a world where innovation, by helping others, you actually create a better world for everybody, including yourself, because you're creating a bigger pie. It sounds like that you're operating from that philosophy.
That's a great way of putting it. Yep. I think that I like the idea of win-wins. Sometimes it's hard to reach people because people are jaded, to get them to understand, no, this is really a win-win. We're not in it just for ourselves. We want for other people as well.
Yeah, and that's part of leading into what we're talking about, because both of you are very motivated, and you've done a number of things. I mean, Mark, you've been, I know you've worked as a nurse Then did wrestling as well, and that's pretty cool. I think I think it's cool. I used to watch wrestling when I was a kid. So you're kind of my superhero. Um, but and so you're both working together, and but there are a number of people, particularly men, that are a bit lost in the world today. They're feeling lonely. They're feeling like they've lost their place. From your perspective, in your area of the world, what have you both seen in that regard?
What do you think?
Well, I'm not a man.
I think I see a bit of that even in my own teenage son, where he doesn't really know what he wants to do with his life, and he, doesn't have any friends, maybe. And I think all that's a very temporary thing. I think he just hasn't found himself yet. But then I try to think back, okay, what was going through my mind at his age? I can certainly relate to some of that, but I also can remember having having a drive to just try to get a little better at something and a little better at something, and that the process of just trying to get better would accumulate. I don't see that in him, but I'm hoping that he sees that in himself.
I think on it, like to touch on that, like I think the state of the world, the way it is right now, how it's so non-traditional
Mm,
anymore, I can see how that could impact a man's role in the home. It now being, you don't have to work a 9 to 5 job or have a career. I mean, I mean, we've come up with a career ourselves. We've created our own business, so maybe if you're not working a 9 to 5 and grinding, not home all the time like a traditional man would be.
mm,
And for me, I stayed home, so it used to be very traditional for us. Now the world is changing to where that 9 to 5 isn't providing for the family, and everything's so expensive, so maybe there's more pressure on the husband. I know for me as a woman coming in and being able to help and come alongside of Mark as a business partner has been incredible, not only financially, but for our relationship. So I would hope that, that takes some pressure off a little
yeah,
bit.
and it's interesting because you mentioned about these traditional role models, and I wonder about that from that perspective. I'm not saying that we should go to back to those traditional role models. The point that I look at with that is people were very clear about what it is they were to do. So if you go back to the 1950s, it was just expected. The guy would go to work, the woman would take care of the home, and then things opened up, and I think it's right that they did. And then there's all these different ways of doing things now. It's not so clear as to what we do. Do you think that part of that has caused the problem of not having that clarity of what to do? And maybe do we need to have more teaching around how to make a decision, how to decide on what is right for you?
That's a good question too. I think that there are definitely functional there are probably functional skills and functional values that are no longer a priority in education systems. That's a whole nother topic, but in education systems and maybe even in the homes or even just in media in general.
Mm. So what do you mean by when you say functional skills in the education system? That's a new one that I haven't heard before, which is
So
I'd like to explore.
just like you said, like the the decision making process, like that's a the ability to make decisions quickly and to be decisive about them. That is a functional skill that has real world value. I think knowing that there's volcanoes in Hawaii isn't probably really going to benefit your life in the scheme of things, but knowing how to know understanding like how to create value in others' lives, how to pick up on social cues, how to relate to other
Mm.
people, how to like I always think of the how to deal with finances, or like the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. I want my son to read that. I'm like, you're going to the library and you're checking that book out because you might not want to make friends and you might be an introvert, but I want you to understand the process because it's a valuable process.
Mm.
So if that answers that question.
Yeah, I understand what you're talking about now. That it's those soft skills of being able to get out there and do things, and I can relate to that as well. My son, we're on school holidays here, and he has to prepare and present 2 5-minute talks on can be on any topic that he wants, but he has to present a public speaking topic to me on whatever he chooses to speak on. Part for that reason to go okay, because being able to communicate is so important in this world. But do you think from that side of things, that fear of communication because we're not teaching that in schools, and then not being sure of what your role is? Because also too, when we look at it, you know, there's all these different opportunities available. I look at my dad, for example. He worked in the same organization for his entire career. He did different jobs, but he worked for the same big organization, an electricity provider. And when I look at I've lost count of how many jobs I've had in my life. It was a shiny thing. Let's go over there. And it was so it got so bad I can remember my tax file number off by heart. That's because I've applied for so many jobs where I had to fill that in. And that's where I was wondering, we need do you think it would help having some of those soft skills that you're talking about in the education system? Do you think that's what we need now?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, we've lost a lot of that, being able to, again, and I hate to say traditional roles because that will probably touch a nerve on a lot of people, but the women should be with their children.
Mm,
I mean, we should be working as well, but we should also be caring for our children too. I
mm,
mean, teaching those roles to be more maternal rather than to be more masculine, and going out and you can still provide for your family but still be a mother, I think, are important. And we don't that's probably touchy, like, on what's happening in the world right now, but we're definitely not teaching any of that. So in our home, for instance, we try to teach that stuff.
it's an
Yeah.
important. Oh, sorry, you're going to say, Marco?
Oh, I like just to add to that thought. I look at like I look at families like in my own experience growing up or around us right now that have they're educating their kids on their own,
Mm,
and we use public school systems, and I don't see really much of a deficit in in any of the conventional skills that the school is teaching, which begs the question, what are they teaching? But I do see a lot more of those inner social development, a lot more of those functional things.
mm,
So there might be a lack of discipline. I think the school's great at kind of the structure, and I think structure is important.
mm,
But the structure has to be balanced, I think, with functional skills.
yeah, that's interesting because I mean, it is from that perspective of having those functional skills that you're talking about, having that ability, especially for guys going out and doing that. And talk because it seems to be natural that the women will talk to each other. I know that they did studies, and from a very early age, young girls, baby girls, would be starting to talk, and would even though they weren't talking to anyone, they would be mouthing and as though they were talking. Whereas guys, we were much, and when we did talk, it was incomprehensible anyway. It's like, and very caveman type stuff. And this is research studies showing that. And I'm just wondering from that perspective, because I've been with my son, I've been very much, get out there and let's do some public speaking and do some writing, got him to do some creative writing many years ago, just to help stimulate that. It wasn't with that intention initially, it was just partly to help with his education. But now I think back about it, you're talking about this, I'm thinking about going, do boys need a different way of learning as well? Because we kind of one is there's a little bit of rough and tumble, but also guys tend not to be as compliant. We tend to be a little bit. Do we need some of that more strict? You will do this for young boys to help with that
Oh,
discipline.
sure.
I mean, in our home, we do. As far as is the school going to teach that? Probably not. But I mean, shoot, they're teaching really weird things right now. So I don't know how much faith I put in our public school system. But in our own home, we're definitely teaching that. It's important to, we call them real life skills, and if they confront a situation, or it may seem trivial to them, but we try to spin it on, hey, this could be a real life situation. It could
Mm,
be, an issue with a friend, or it's like, look, you're going to grow up with people like this your whole life, whether you're a boy or a girl. So it's important to learn these lessons now.
mm.
Um, so we're pretty adamant about that in our own home.
What about role models from that perspective of, because I look at it, I hear a lot of these stories and they talk about norms and things like that, and I didn't have that experience. When I was younger, my dad, I must have wanted to, I went and played golf and lawn bowls with my dad. And as a result of that, in playing those games, we we would then, because he played as part of a social group with a whole bunch of other men. And initially I went with my dad, and then I got sent off with other people. So when they paired off or quadded off for golf, there's groups of four they went off to play. I would go off with three other guys and go around the 18 holes with them. And maybe it was fortunate they're all. I think they're all gentlemen, or maybe they just had reasonable values. Maybe they all weren't gentlemen, but they had reasonable values. But when I look back at that now, and same when we were playing lawn bowls, they were kind of like mentors in a way, because I was asking that I wasn't as good as them, so I was asking questions of how to play and how to be better. But also too, just modeling their behaviors. There was never anything misogynistic or anything in that behavior that I recall. They were, so that's why I say gentlemen. And we just went around, played golf. I'd ask some questions, learn from that. Do you think we've lost a bit of that for young boys as well? Having this kind of, do they need the mentors? Have we lost that?
Sure. I don't know if we've lost it, but I think maybe the real value and the importance and the emphasis on it is not really there. I think um, you should have somebody to look up to, and instead of just like do what you feel, or do what or do whatever is popular or trending right now. No, I think you should do what you aspire to do what you see being done that is greater than you. So, and that's just the what you describe as an archetypical father figure. So either you have a father that's your father figure, or you have a father figure that is
Yes.
a father figure. And I think that goes along. That is a natural process of development. And if you are missing that, I'm not going to say you're disadvantaged. I'm going to say that it's going to be more of a challenge. I think it's probably more of a challenge for you're just not gonna. I think you're just gonna be lacking some of that. And you talk about the the boys being the aggressive, kind of like my son's a tinkerer.
Mm.
Um, I think that it's gonna be harder to cultivate and harness that stuff without a role model.
Yeah, and that's because I was wondering, because there's a number of articles in the news about um, particular guys out there that are quite misogynistic, but they're getting a lot of traction. I found it interesting. There was one in particular that was in the news a lot, and there was a organization here. There was a news article that came out in January about how this particular person had grabbed hold of majority of young men, that most of them had heard of him, um, they connected with him. Do you think part of that might be because there's a void of strong role models, of alternative role models out there?
And I think you're talking about a professional fighter, maybe, if that's who you're
Yeah,
talking
no,
about
yeah,
now.
yeah. Andrew Tate,
Okay,
yes, that's right. Yeah.
okay. So Um, I have several thoughts on that. And on one end, I got to tread lightly here, but on one end, I'm kind of rooting some of that. Now, he's an extreme, is what it is. He's an extreme end.
Mm,
Um, and then there's obviously the lack thereof of people like him, or people somewhere in the balance, is the other extreme. So
mm,
I think, yeah, he's got this following of people who completely lack an identifiable masculine figure in their life.
mm.
So, like I kind of small level, I'm like, okay, you go, man. But he's an extreme. It would
Yeah.
be, he's an extreme he's an extreme figure, and I think that I would like to see people like my sons gravitate towards somebody who has a more balanced personality. But I absolutely agree with you. He's getting traction because he's resonating in a void.
Mm. I love what you said there about the extreme side of things. And this is where I wonder, is part of what we see out there what is the majority, or is it just there's a few extremes out there? Because when that article came out, and the article was, what was it called? The Man Cave. Not the article wasn't by the way, it was in the press, but it was based on research by an organization in Australia called the Man Cave, and I'm going to throw them under the bus here, because I asked them and I said, because it was based on this research that they did that, young boys have been, they agree with his opinion and things like that. So I said, well, I wrote to them and said, can I have a copy of the research? I'd like to see what these results were. It took me a little bit over 2 months, I think, before they gave me the research, but I got hold of it. And then I read the results. And what was interesting was, yes, there was roughly half that didn't agree with him. There was, roughly half young boys agreed with him, but when you looked at what they agreed with, they liked that he had a strong personality, that he was confident. These were the things that they liked. And the way the article was written about was that he had a grip on, them as far as in relation to women. And then when you looked at the research, there was 15% of the young boys, I can't remember the percentage was, 15 point something, that agreed with his views on women. But the only view that was in that mix was his view that sometimes women are difficult to understand. Not that, it was, so that's what the boys agreed with. And so when I looked at this research, I thought, here you've got this article that's saying that Andrew Tate's got this big grip on young boys and he's a misogynistic asshole. And that's the way they portrayed the article. But when you looked at it and go, well, yeah, this guy probably falls into that category. Maybe I can take the probably out of that. But when the boys were looking at him, they were clearly, not only they were identifying, okay, I like this trait, but I don't like the trait about him not being misogynistic, because that didn't come up at all. So I wonder about that. Are we really portraying that what's the truth out there for the majority, where actually young boys are actually quite able to assess a person like that and pick certain qualities that are good? I mean, as horrible as this person was, if you look at Adolf Hitler, terrible, horrible person, but to say he wasn't a good public speaker, we don't like what he was talking about, but to say he wasn't able to talk to people in influence would be incorrect. And yet the young boys out there seem to be able to identify what were the right traits to pay. So I'm just wondering, is it because of maybe social media, a few other things like that? We've got a few extreme people making a really loud voice, but that's not really what's going on?
I'd like to think that that's actually really hopeful. That's really insightful. It gives me a lot of inspiration hearing that. But I think back at my own childhood in the wrestling. Let's pan back to wrestling in the 1980s.
Let's go to wrestling.
You had your faces and your heels, right?
Yeah.
And we all instinctively, they were all big, strong guys. And then when you're a little boy and you see these big, strong men yelling and flexing and everything, you're going to admire that, right?
Yeah.
That was a natural thing. But we always liked the face and not the heel, right? We always rooted for the good guy. So you didn't have to be told that, you just did.
Yeah.
So, and then when one of them, turned heel, as they said, well, you didn't like him anymore, So
Yeah.
I think, people are picking up on the face qualities of an Andrew Tate, and they are distancing themselves from the heel qualities. And I would say that the part of him that probably is appealing to them is that he has a backbone. And I remember one of my mentors when I was younger used to say a spine is a terrible thing to waste. And so I think it's resonating with them. It's actually kind of inspiring to see that, to hear that these kids are able to discern, well, no, I like that he's taking a stance on things, and I don't like that he does have some extremes.
And that's right, because I was wondering from that perspective, having looked at it and done a fair bit of research, and yes, there's a lot in the media about boys being lost, and yes, not to say that there aren't some that are, and we should help them. But I was just wondering, is it a skewed perspective? Um, because that's what's getting the noise. I mean, isn't it the old saying, "The squeaky wheel gets the oil," or I would say the screechy wheel in this case.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think there's anything further I need to add to that. Unfortunately, a lot of people will just believe what they're told rather than believing what is going on right in front of them that they actually have evidence of. Um, and that's very influential. It's
Mm,
very influential to hear these things. And I can't imagine being a young boy just wanting to be like my youngest son wanting to climb trees and wanting to shoot bows and arrows and then being told that he's toxic. He's not. He's perfectly normal. So it's perfectly normal for boys to want to break things and to fight, even wrestle.
mm,
So uh, if that the percentage and the reality of that causing dysfunction in society, it's got to be at an almost non-existent level. I don't see it anywhere. I don't see evidence of it anywhere in my day-to-day interactions with people.
mm,
You come across a jerk every now and then, and they're a jerk, and
yeah.
they can be a man or a woman. They can still be a jerk. So, but to have this idea that just you, because you're a man, you are just somehow prone to being a wild beast. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, because you mentioned toxic there, and I'm guessing you're referring to toxic masculinity, because that's a buzz. Well, I don't like to call it a buzzword, but it's a phrase that's used, and it's something I've been trying to understand. What is toxic masculinity in the sense of, I mean, if you had toxic behavior, I get that, but if you were to say toxic masculinity, that infers that it's purely a male behavior. And yet I'm yet to see any behavior that's encapsulated in toxic masculinity that would be solely a male purview. I mean, they talk about promiscuity as being part of a toxic masculinity, and I think, well, if you go out to a nightclub and a young girl, and a young boy go home together, and they get it on, they're both. It takes two, so it's not just the
Tango.
guy. So is it, is promiscuity purely a toxic masculinity behavior? Have we again gone too far with that? Is that just a bit too screechy on that? I mean, like you say, people can be a jerk, and yes, guys can be a jerk. Some guys can be jerk, and sometimes we can even behave like a jerk. I must admit, there's been times in my past I'm pretty sure I characterize some of my behavior as being a jerk, and at sometimes, if I'm going to be honest. Um, but does that, is that a case of, you know, is it something that we've again taken to an extreme and not really the majority?
Your thoughts on it? No, I think that we have. Um, I think that there you run the risk when you try to guilt people out of I guess the way they were made, the way they were designed to be.
Mm,
You run the risk of tipping the scale back the other way.
yeah.
Um, so that's my take on it. What do you
I
think?
mean, I think we've come so far in our culture that we've gone like overboard, where
Mm,
maybe you're right, like it's too much. And I think it also really boils down to your home life, like how your parents are raising you and
mm,
what they're allowing in the home, and what they are deeming as toxic, or for us, there should be a certain balance between, we have two girls and two boys, so
mm,
we see, all different ages from 16 to almost 6.
mm,
So like a 10-year span between them. So we see different personality traits in each of them. As far as the boys go, I we try our best to have, Mark teach them, the manly side and how to treat a woman, how to treat your wife, how to,
mm,
that portion of it. And then the good balance of me coming in and loving them and nurturing them. And they can cry to me and they can snuggle me. Like my 6-year old, he'll be 7 in 2 days. he still like twirls my hair and tells me I'm beautiful, and I'm like, yes, keep doing that. I want to encourage that stuff. So, but there's a balance there, it's, we're not in the home saying, just because you like to twirl my hair and tell me I'm beautiful, that, you're going to be this soft boy or whatever, like you're not going to be masculine. So
Mm.
I think it all really starts in the home too.
Because I was wondering about that from that perspective. You've mentioned that a couple of times with boys roughhousing, and that's come up a few times. There's a bit of research on that now, that it's important for boys to have that roughhousing. And is it a case of we need to have that, but we need to set a framework around that? I mean, if you take most sports, for example, you took the violence out of it. I mean, if you were standing at the traffic light and someone tackled you, that would be pretty inappropriate. But if you take a tackle out of football, it's not going to be that exciting a game. Is it a case of setting the framework of where things are appropriate?
Yeah, for sure. That's like the structure. Structure is always good. Um, structure facilitates discipline. Too much structure then you put a container on that desire to be explorative. Yeah, I could look at my own boys and see that play out over and over again. If I let them do whatever they want, they'll pop tires. But if I don't let them do anything, then they'll implode. So
Yeah. Yeah, because I was wondering, like, well, from what you're saying there, sorry, because I look at my childhood, and I had a sister that was a year younger than me, and there was a period where she was taller than me too, which I really hated, because girls, they mature that little bit quicker, and she anyway. But I distinctly remember, because you talked about being that role model. Grace, you mentioned about Mark being that male role model, because I remember my mum telling me, when you're playing with your sister, be careful. You're stronger. Your normal play could hurt her. Is it, I mean, that structure that we need when you're talking about that structure, just going, hey, this is how we interact. There are physical differences. We mentioned about the UFC fighter before, but I remember, who's a famous podcaster now? Does talks about UFC mental blank.
Joe Rogan?
Joe Rogan, yes.
Joe Rogan, yeah.
He's going to hate that I forgot his name. Not that he knows me. But, he talks about, I remember listening to him once talk about how, you can have some really, really tough UFC fighters, women fighters that could take on most guys, but you put them against an equal equivalent of a male in the UFC and they're just going to get creamed. Is that part of the framework we need to be teaching guys? Hey, there is a physical difference. There are physical differences that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, I want to take that over because I'm passionate about that, because it's the same thing. We have a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, and our daughter is 5. She's going to be 6. He's going to be 7 in 2 days. So they're very close in age, and it's the same thing. And I'll be honest, Oliver, our almost 7-year-old, he's tall and he's like kind of like built, a little bit. How do I describe? Our daughters are a little bit, could probably beat our boys up, I guess is the best way to put it. Maybe like thicker. I don't know the best way to put it. But it's honest that, Ruby could beat up Oliver, but we still have to teach Oliver, you are a boy, you will be a man one day, and you are to be more gentle with women. And that's how it should be. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think maybe a lot of people these days will see something wrong with that. Of course, we're going to encourage our daughters, you are strong and you can beat the boys up if you need to. And, we will never deny that. But I don't think there's anything wrong with telling them how they were made. They were made this way. And there are certain roles that you play. And a man is not to beat up a woman, or a boy is not to beat up a girl. So I don't think there's anything like that.
Yeah, because I mean, from that perspective, generally there's a physical strength difference. For if you're going on averages, yes, there are some men that are more petite. I've got a number of friends who fall into that category, and that's what I was wondering from that manly perspective as well. Is it more about, because we mentioned about the wrestling, and I liked wrestling as well, but my superhero, when I was a kid, was Michael Knight. For those young who were old enough to remember that show. Exactly. And he had no superpower. He had a cool car, but he didn't have any superpowers. maybe he was intelligent, but he certainly wasn't this muscle-bound person either. Um, is it a case of too, we need to be encouraging people, yeah, encouraging boys to say, "Hey, you got to decide what's right for you, and whatever you decide is okay."
On some level, yeah. I think that it's important to, to I think that you should try to be the best version of yourself,
Mm,
be realistic about
mm,
it. So while as a kid I liked Superman and Spider-Man and all these other things, those are completely unrealistic
yeah.
achievements. You're never going to fly and be bulletproof.
I
Um,
tried. I jumped off the roof a few times.
it didn't work. I tried to manufacture even like a hang glider at one point in time. It
And no matter how
worked
much I
good
went,
enough to not
the heat ray didn't come out.
didn't work like I had planned. No, a human kite. Um, but so again, unrealistic. But I think identifying, what's the best realistic version of myself, and continually trying to develop that. Now, I don't think that the masculinity or being or what is manly has to be okay. Not all of us are going to be 6'5", 275 pounds.
Mm,
That does not matter. It's what's going on in here and what's going on in here. What's your mindset and
mm,
what's your drive? Because even myself, I can identify people that physically I could crush, but they are definitely manly because they have it's driven by their internal, by who they are inside.
yeah, I love that. So from that, I mean, that's the what I was getting to. How do we encourage people to be driven by what's inside? Is it a case of teaching people to like themselves and love themselves from a male perspective? And is that okay to say to men to, hey, to like yourself? It's okay to like yourself. It's okay to love yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that you're not going to be very useful or functional to other people and value other people if you don't value yourself first.
Mm.
Um, so, and again, there's balance and there's extremes. There's people who are full of themselves,
That's a
and in all
different
reality,
thing. That's a different
that's
thing.
probably a facade, that
Correct. Yeah.
is masking. So, but I think if you don't value yourself and you don't see the value in yourself, then
Mm.
how will you go out and add value to others' lives? And that's a conversation I've had with my oldest son too many times. Like I want to beat it in his head that listen, you're a brilliant person, you're a valuable person. You might not have all the skills you want, but skills are developed through practice. And
Mm.
if you'll commit to the practice, you will be confident in yourself. You'll understand the values you have, and then you'll be able to go out and charge forward. So, and
Yeah.
again, I get beating that thing. I mean, I beat that drum with him as much as I can because I want him to get that concept. I think that's something that probably understood at a much earlier age than him. But even still, I mean, I can even still remember, you know, uh, late teens, early 20s, still just having a lot of, you know, that you call it self love, just that internal, knowing that I'm a valuable person and that I can add value to other people's lives. I wrestled with that for a while.
Mm. And that's what I was wondering from that perspective to boys, because girls seem to naturally have more support groups, and that maybe because they do talk to each other more, whereas guys are a bit more stoic in that sense. And even from my perspective now, I mean, I'm not a big, I mean, quite to the contrary that I'm doing these kind of shows, but in my normal life, I'm not a big talker. If I've got a problem, I mean, I'll go down here. I'm at the beach house at the moment. I've got my self-propelled lawnmower, not ride on, but you walk behind it, so I don't have to push it. But I call it gumping now. I'm forest gumping. I go up and down the lawn, have my space, just to have my head space. But do we need to have part of that? Because I wonder, and I love the fact that the feminist movement happened and we created more equality. And again, I'm wondering, has that pendulum gone too far? I was listening to someone talk about how him and his wife have a rock climbing group. And then in the gym that they do it in, they have a women's rock climbing group, but they don't have a men's one. And they won't have a men's one because if they did, it would be deemed as sexist. And I'm just wondering, have we lost a bit of those man groups where men can have those role models because it is considered to be sexist?
I just want to say real quick, I think it's ridiculous being a woman, and being all for women and women's rights. And I'm not a feminist per se, but I do believe that women should and can do anything. Again, I'll
Mm.
teach my girls, you can do anything you want. You can do anything a man can do, absolutely.
Yeah.
However, it going so extreme has become, I think it's ridiculous because it puts a man in a place where he's not manly anymore, and
Mm.
he's not allowed to be manly anymore because now the women are supposed to be manly, and that's kind of silly to me. So as far as our boys having role models, we're seeing a lot of these like softer men,
Mm.
in media now where they're supposed to look up to, where they're not, I don't want to say traditional manly, but they're not standing up for what's right. They're not,
Mm.
making the decisions they should be in the home, and they're being silenced. So I'm pretty vocal about it going way too far. I don't know how Mark feels about the space being taken over, but I think it's definitely extreme.
Yeah, I don't experience a lot of that in our day to day, but I can see it out there, like the example you laid out with the rock climbing. It's, I think there's just more importance has been placed on that than is entirely necessary. It's okay to, it's okay for the boys to be boys, and
Mm.
to want to, to play cowboys and Indians, even as grown-ups, we still kind of play cowboys and Indians and see the guys get the big monster truck.
We have
Um,
Monster Jam here every now and then. It's like
right,
it's
it's just
awesome.
a characterization.
Yeah.
So it's an outlet for that is all that is. I mean, I think even the mixed martial arts is an outlet for that.
Mm.
Women are welcome to join, but it's again, it's probably safer to play by different rules.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I was having went and interviewed some people that were playing roller hockey, which was interesting. Inline hockey that they actually play the mixed teams, and the women are actually, I would have thought it would have been a physical sport, but it's actually more about being articulate and that kind of thing. And the women are actually very good because they're able to. They can hip and shoulder better, apparently. So they were telling me. So that's an interesting sport where I thought it wouldn't have been equal, but it actually is equal for men and women to play together. Which was sorry, go ahead.
No,
But I was thinking
yeah, that's
there's
okay.
nothing wrong with equality. Like there's
Mm,
nothing wrong with that. I love that. I think it's
yeah.
great. Just don't silence the other party or make the other party feel less than. Or if they
Mm,
decide to take a more masculine or more feminine approach to something, just don't silence that. That's who
Yeah.
we were made to be. So
And the reality is there's nothing wrong with on either side acknowledging that somebody is just developmentally or just because of who they are going to have more abilities and inclinations. Again, in a traditional school classroom, girls always do better. They
mm,
always do better because that is where it's encompasses social skills, which is I believe just comes naturally to them. Where
mm.
boys it doesn't. So now we've got boys with ADD, which is probably just being a boy. You're confining them. You're trying to contain them, like trying to put a squirrel in a cage when it's
Mm,
supposed to run around and jump and do crazy things. So I think that if you were to take boys and put them in a hands-on learning environment,
mm.
and then inversely insist that girls can only learn in this hands-on learning environment too. You might shine the light and go, oh, they're better learners. It's not that either are smarter. It's just that you're more inclined here and they're more inclined here, and that's just a reality. I mean,
Mm. Okay. And what about from a practical perspective as well? Do we need to be encouraging? Because I mean, hearing what you're saying, I mean, and I agree, equality should be there. We all should have that equality of opportunity, and people can. Doesn't matter whether male or female, you can excel at whatever you choose to excel. Is what I believe. Um, and from a practical perspective, where we've lost this a little bit about being men, I've heard of it, I've never seen it, but where a woman has got upset because a man's opened the door for her. Said, I've never seen it. I don't know, but I've heard some people say, yes, that happened. Um, But do we need to be encouraging do we need to be encouraging boys, you do things, just do it respectfully. And if someone doesn't like it, say, okay, that's not a problem, without getting upset, and just and have that confidence. Because you mentioned here, I wrote it down. I think I wrote it down. Or I was going to write it down. Standing up for what is right. So and it's, I don't think I know a lot of guys that open doors, and they don't do it because they think the woman is lesser. They just do it because it's a polite gesture.
Right. So
The question,
the concept, chivalry, we call it, right?
yeah,
And so I think chivalry is inherently altruistic. So for somebody to try to flip that on its head calls into question the other person and their motivation, than the person being chivalrous. Was I being chivalrous because I'm misogynist? Come on, that's reaching. That's really going out on the deep end. Because I would open a door for a kid, a woman, another man, all the same, and it has nothing to do with them being lesser. It has to do with me trying to be an altruistic person. So to flip that on its head, it's very bizarre to me. Very
I
bizarre.
think it's very out there. I mean, we operate from a realm of respect anyways, teaching our children to be respectful, trying to respect each other. So I think that if you were just trying to be respectful in an aspect and somebody took that as insulting, then you apologize and you just don't do it, like you said. But to be a woman and to be offended by that, I think it's a little far. Again, we've never really experienced that.
yeah.
I mean, I don't think we're that old. I just turned 40. He's 45. So we're still we're not like in this younger generation, but we're like right in the middle. So I don't feel like chivalry is dead yet for us. Maybe we are, I guess to our kids, maybe old school, but we still, want them to show respect in those ways. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Because I was wondering from that perspective, because I said I've never seen that, but and in talking with the women that I've talked to, particularly on this show, the women have said we want the guy to be, we want him to be a gentleman. We want it. We'd love to have the conversation and emotion, which I might struggle with that. I'm not the best, but they talk about how they want that the guy, and I love what you said, standing up for what's right. Someone that is going to stand, someone that has a backbone. So maybe not date a politician. Sorry for the politician. No, I'm not sorry for the politicians out there.
We got them here too.
I steal from no, I won't go there. Jim Rohn had a great quote on politicians. I'll let you look it up. But is that what we need to be encouraging young boys and go, hey, you have a backbone and do things in a nice way. And we talked about some 80s stuff there. We can go to Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse, where he's a bouncer, and he talks about, his whole philosophy is be nice, even though he's a bouncer. Is that the conversation we need to be having with young boys and say, hey, be strong, but do it in a nice way? So as you're
I love that you just went to Roadhouse, man. I think you're my new best friend now.
One of my favorite movies.
Roadhouse, man. There is a case. So that movie, for example, that is a classic case of a balanced masculine character. He's rough, but he's considerate. He's educated. Is it fantasy? Of course, it's a movie. I mean, he can't really beat up the wrestler in there. That guy would cream him. Yeah. But the philosophy, the underlying is that he's always doing the right thing. He's always out to do the right thing. So if somebody else has a problem with you doing the right thing, that's their problem. But I'd like to think that if people, boys and men, if you are always defaulting to what you intrinsically know to be the right thing, because I believe a lot of that's intrinsic. I believe you just kind of have a general moral compass. Then one, you'll lead a good life, and you will naturally add value to other people's lives, and you will naturally gravitate towards a role model and become a role model.
Yeah. From your perspective,
I'm still practicing this stuff. I don't have it figured out.
He's definitely still practicing. Can I say from a women's perspective, to kind of jump in there,
please,
to flip it on its head, is that women inherently just want to be taken care of. And
Mm.
that's just something that is woven inside of us. And that doesn't mean that we have to be the damsel in distress and we can't work and we have to stay home. That looks like all different levels for all different women.
Mm.
So to pin it, to one extreme to another, as a feminist to a stay-at-home mom, isn't fair. But it is absolutely true that every woman wants to be cared for. They want to be loved. They want to be protected.
Mm.
It's shown over and over and over again that that's what we want. So to teach a young boy a woman's perspective is I think it can be eye-opening. Like, hey, they do want to be cared for. They do want, maybe they don't want the door open for them, but they do want to be protected. They do want to know that you're going to provide for them.
Mm.
It's in just in us.
It's interesting because a number of women use a water metaphor, and I've had a couple. They're very different, but it relates to water and land. Where one has said the women are the flow, so they're like the river. They're intuitive. They know what's going on, and the guys are the banks that keep the river from going all over the place. And another one was that the women are the ocean again, all that flow, and the guys are the mountain that's coming out of the ocean that's constantly stable and always there. And it's interesting how those metaphors seem to be very consistent along those lines. Is that what, again, we need to be teaching guys as well, and especially when relating to women? And maybe that comes back to that Andrew Tate quote about, not sometimes we don't understand them. And is that sometimes we just need to step back and go, okay, we just need to be the rock, be consistent and leave it at that? Or is that too, well, we're dealing with gender here.
Yeah, I
Is
could
it
put
too
it any.
gender specific?
I couldn't put it any better than that.
Okay.
I
Grace,
couldn't add nothing. I could add to that. Yeah.
No, I think it's wonderful. Again, we were created men and women for a reason.
mm,
There's no denying the way that we were made, and our DNA and our, attributes, our behaviors. We can hone them and we can teach our children to act certain ways and direct them and guide them, but we are intrinsically born a certain way, and a man is to be, the provider. Does that mean that a woman cannot be a provider? No, we can,
mm,
absolutely. It can ebb and it can flow, but um I think it's very important that we teach our children that. I think that in this generation that we're in right now, it's not being taught, and that's why we have a lot of these confused and lost little boys, because they don't have direction on what they are, what a male role is, or what a male role looks like. So
mm,
being told they can be a little bit more feminine, or and maybe they are, like you said, some boys are born a little bit more feminine, and that's fine. They're every man isn't manly in your traditional sense, but to tell them that they're not you know going to be a man is a disservice to them. So I believe that you should definitely be teaching, and I would wish that more people taught their boys the difference between a man and a woman. That's
yeah.
really what it boils down to.
Well, to draw from what you mentioned before, said doing the right thing, standing up for what's right. I mean, if you take Stephen Hawking, who's passed away, but if you take Stephen Hawking, you wouldn't take him as a physically strong person, as a manly in that sense, if you were to do that, but to take him as manly, as someone who stood up for what's right for him. I mean, he was pretty strong in his opinion and did some great things in the world. And that's what I'm wondering, is that I love that you brought that up, and I'm going to keep bringing it up because I think that framework, is that the framework we need to be teaching guys? Hey, I've got a number of friends who, they stay home. The man stays home, she goes to work, and that's how they've worked out how to do it. It's doing what's right for you. Is that what we need to be teaching boys? Doesn't matter what the rest of the world is doing. You find your niche, find that person to be with, whoever that might be. I'm including same-sex couples in that as well. Whoever that is, you decide on what's right for you and stand up for what's right for you. Is that the framework we need to be teaching young boys?
I think that, again, like I said, I think there's an intrinsic sense of right and wrong. So I believe that they should have, they should stay within those, they should stay within those absolutes for sure.
Mm,
And that means that, it's easy to get sucked into to popular opinion, and popular opinion doesn't know, like he doesn't know your situation, doesn't know that if
Mm,
I, you know, if a, or not me, but if a man was married to a woman and she was a surgeon and he's not, then well, that's okay. That doesn't make you any less masculine or any less valuable in your family dynamic. It just, yeah, there's, it's okay to have different, you know, daily activities, but that doesn't detract from the value. It doesn't make one more valuable than the other.
yeah. The other thing I want to come back to, we talked about it earlier. You mentioned about Grace. You mentioned about those traditional role models, um, and because some of the work that I'm doing at the moment, and this is slightly off topic but kind of related, is a lady that I'm working with here in Australia. We're working on some programs because at the moment there's a big issue that we're having in society at the moment where women, because they're putting their career, or I'm going to say families, there's how we because families are putting the career first, the woman's career first. They're getting to an older stage in life when they want to have children. They're not able to have. There's a lot of people out there not able to have children because of that dynamic. They haven't done that. So we're working on some programs to try and help shift that. But again, is that something we need to look at as well from this manly perspective of going, okay, there's a balance here we need to work towards. It's different than what it was in the 50s where, she stayed home and therefore could have the children. Now we've got to work out a balance where if she is pursuing a career, because she can do anything and should do whatever she wants to do, but as a guy, you've got to look at how to be flexible in what you're doing as well. There's certain things that you might need to do at home to help out to enable these things to happen. Maybe that so you can have as a family have children earlier, while still maintaining the ability to do a career, that kind of thing. Do we need to be having those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it in all ways with friends and family, my sister, a lot of my girlfriends. Mark and I did it completely 1950s. I'll be I'll be real. I was in college and we got married and had our first child and then decided to move to Florida. And so I dropped my college, what I was pursuing, and decided to I was pregnant with our second child, so decided to be Mark said, I want you to be home with our children. I will step up and do this. And it was very odd at the time because this was 15 years ago where, still even my girlfriends were like, we're working, we're getting our careers and we're not getting married. And so I have a lot of friends in that same boat where they're now 40 years old and they've had their career. Some of them aren't even married because they've put their career first and they have that yearning to settle down and have children and they can't. I've seen it in all different aspects. I've seen it in all ways. So I think whatever works for you is what's going to be best for you. Only you can make that decision for yourself.
Mm,
I'm thankful that the way that we did it, as much as, now that our children are all in school and we started this business together, I think it turned out to be wonderful. I mean, what better way than Mark kind of capped off his career, as nursing, and for me to come side by side with him to start this career together now that our children are in school. I thought that was perfect, but that was just for us. We should be talking about it though. I mean, we should definitely be talking about that.
I think that, so if you have, this is obviously, it's a reality. It is that there are women that are coming into a career that it becomes an
sorry, I've just lost the mic there. It's just gone soft. I'm not sure.
Oh, can you hear me?
You can hear now. Yeah,
Okay.
cool.
I was a little too far out. So I think that for them, there's an opportunity. I think that if they can't have their own family per se, like get pregnant because they started too late, there's still the opportunity for adoption. There's still, probably you'd probably be creating a really great family if you've already secured your financial situation and you already have, that part of your life is already developed and established. You probably make a great candidate to be a parent. You know,
Mm,
so I still think there's still opportunity and there's still the ability that can still be worked into a functional society.
mm. And what role does, from that change in that perspective, what should we be guiding, young men to do? It's like, if we're having that discussion about having the family earlier, I mean, do guys need to have a bit of a shift in how, they approach that traditional role and go, well, hey, I'm going to do some extra stuff around the house? Or again, again, I struggle with this because my mum was anally retentive, and I had to fold my clothes exactly the right way. I had to fold it. My bed, when I joined the army, I could make my bed military style. That's how I had to make my bed when I was a kid. So I had to do all that, and she had me washing dishes, doing all that sort of stuff. And so as a boy, I had all that experience. So it was no big deal for me in a family to do that. And generally, I did do it because I didn't like the way someone else did it.
Mhm.
And but do guys need to have more of that experience and it be okay?
It's definitely okay. I think that can that be explored? Like a home economics class. I don't even know if they still do that anymore.
We did when I was in school. I went to a trade
Yeah,
school and we had home economics and learned cooking.
yeah. So I think that
Girls love guys that can cook. That's one of the reasons when I joined the
Yes.
army, I was well, that was my I was when I was I'll tell you this story. I don't know if I told Mark or not before, but I was when I joined, I joined the army to get out of school because my dad said I wasn't allowed to leave school. And then I got to the army and realized I don't really want to do this. And there was only a couple of good jobs like signals and all those kind of things, and everyone else went to infantry. So like I didn't like that. And there was one offer, one job available that no one else wanted, and it was a chef's position. So, and I went, cool, girls like guys that can cook. That was my first. I was 18. That's my first motivation,
Yeah.
and then I ended up getting posted to the SAS anyway. So I was like, got to do both. But from that perspective, do we need to have? Because I mean, do we need to have that discussion? Because girls like that. They like guys that can do these kind of things.
I mean, we try to, I will say our girls want to cook more than our boys want to cook. So
Mm.
that might be, and so we try. Our 16-year-old, he said, yeah, I'm like, what are you going to do when you move out? Because I'm like, you should learn. Come on, jump in here. Like you can learn. We had him cook us dinner the other night. And it
Mm.
was really just like boiling potatoes and mashing them up. Like, there wasn't much to it. I'm like, come on, guys. But our 16-year-old, naturally, he's like, I'm going to move out and I'm going to live on fast food. Like that's all he wants to do.
mm,
So yes, conversations are important. I think
Mm.
that it will be a culture shock because the role of the woman cooking is great and everything, but I mean, there are lots of nights where I'm taking appointments or busy and Mark has to cook dinner. And it wasn't always that way. Like I said, it was very traditional 1950s for us. So Mark would come home, I'd have dinner, I'd bathe the babies. He just worked, it was
leave
very
it to Beaver.
We got a lot in common, Mark. We got a lot in common.
but now things have changed,
Mm.
now we both work and he's had to step up and do more of the house stuff. So I think the earlier we have those conversations with our young boys, the better. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it just makes them a well-rounded human being, a boy or a girl, either way. Just to be able to be a partner with somebody, whoever that partner is. I think that you being a whole person coming into that relationship as a whole rounded person is nothing but beneficial.
Yeah, I love that. The whole rounded person being able to do all these things and stepping up to do what's needed to be done. That's your. I mean, is that part we put that under the protector role? Guys like to be the protector. We like to be the hero. That's why the stories are written that way. Hey, you can be the hero. Look, the hero does the laundry.
Hey,
Laundry man. I'm laundry
yeah,
man.
that's okay.
It's whatever it looks like, right? It's whatever it looks like on the day to day. The hero might change the tire, but the hero might make eggs for breakfast.
Yeah.
So and you can own that. It's okay to own that. It's okay to take small wins and small victories. So, and when we talked about like having a conversation about that, I think that some of that's on an individual level. I think that like I look at my younger brother, and they're not his girlfriend. They've lived together for as long as we've been married, and they don't have kids, and they probably shouldn't. I mean, it's probably not a good fit for them.
Yeah.
Looking at it honestly. So, but then I think that is just stems from should everybody do what we've done? No. I don't think they should. But
Yeah.
so it comes from, I think, also knowing knowing what, you know, knowing what what your capabilities are, and what your capacity is. So,
Mm. Well, I know that. I mean, again, similar friends who, the guy does do the cooking because he cooks really well. She doesn't. She she's not a good cook. Is that, and they both talk about that. It's like she hates cooking, doesn't want to cook. He does the cooking. But is it partly too when we look at it and we go, well, assigning value to different tasks? Sometimes do we need to have a reset on that as well? Because I was wondering about that. We go out, and when someone goes to work, you've got a tangible um, result from that. You get paid. Whereas someone who stays home, male or female, they're not really getting paid for that, but it is having quite a big impact on the family. Do we need to have that reset and go, well, just have a close look at what the value is there and go, well, even if you might not be getting paid, this is a really, I mean, raising children, extremely valuable thing if you do it right.
there is definitely
Yeah.
you could definitely put that in a monetary value. It's
Well, we did that so like throughout our marriage, up until again for 13 years of our marriage, I stayed home with 4 children and Mark worked. So to hit a reset on that, we had to do that lots of times because,
Mm,
in full, honesty, Mark was making money and he was he was the provider in that aspect. However, I was the back end of everything,
right.
to back babies, 15 months apart, it was a really crazy time. So, um, yeah, there were lots of times where we had to kind of step back and say, I had to give him, honor and respect,
mm,
saying, you go out and you work hard and I appreciate that. And in turn, I would need that from him. Hey, you stay home and you do this. So,
mm.
absolutely. I think it's important to remind each role, whatever that role may be, to just respect what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And I think now that we've shifted into co-business owners, um, value, there's assigned value to certain tasks, but it's not tasks that are necessary.
Mm,
It's looking at things that we might be doing that are unnecessary. So,
mm,
I would be the first one to say, okay, well, you know, in extended leisure time, that's not a valuable thing. But if you're putting away the laundry and feeding the kid, and I'm doing this part of the business, then they're more or less equal. Those are equally valuable things. They equally have their role in a household.
mm. So is that, I mean, from that perspective again, and I love what you mentioned the words there, honor and respect. Again, for men, is that we need to be having more discussion about that. It's about honor and respect. I mean, you're touching on chivalry there, and we did that with share.care. We went back and looked at, we had 10 principles, but we looked at what is some better guidance in that. And we actually went back to the old Knights chivalric code and we rewrote that for a modern era, and made it gender neutral as well. So it was just, do we need to be having those discussions with boys? Does that need to be allowed a voice?
It should, yes. I think that unfortunately, it's easy, if you are filling those roles of provider. It's really easy to see that as more important. Um,
Mm,
it's really easy to get into that kind of, well, I'm the one who's doing this and that, and so I think that having an understanding of that there's an intrinsic value to what your partner's doing also, even though it may not be going out and doing this, there's still a value to what they're doing in your household, because if they weren't doing it, you'd either have to be you'd be doing double time, or you'd be paying somebody to do that. So uh, it's definitely something that needs to be, a spotlight should be on it. It should be it's a topic of conversation.
yeah. So, I mean, it seems like, what about, from that perspective, we did touch on liking yourself. And with that, I was just looking at the separation. It came up before we talked about, and we were heading towards self esteem and confidence. Whereas self-esteem is more about that you do like yourself, whereas confidence is believing that you can do it, which is again different from experience. People confuse experience with confidence just because you've done it a number of times. Well, that's experience, but the ability just to knock on the door is confidence. Do we
Right.
need to be, again, is that something again we need to be encouraging the boys, just get out there and give it a go. Don't be sitting there. I mean, I know I have a 14-year-old who loves to play video games. And I make a spin. Oh, you spent 9 hours getting the big boss. Well, good on you for determination and commitment. I try and put that spin on it. But do we need to get them to say, hey, look, it's about getting out there and giving it a go. You're not gonna, I mean, like anything, if you're doing something new, you're gonna have beginners suck. First time you do a few things, you're gonna, you walk across. Remember, I mean, you might remember, you walk across the dance floor to ask Grace for that first dance. I mean, that's a long, lonely walk that you've got to do yourself. And sometimes she might say no, but you've just got to get there and do it again and again. Is that we need to be encouraging them to do that?
I think failing forward
Mm,
like that is probably one of the single most valuable lessons in life that you can learn is just, do it anyways, do it and jump in feet
mm,
first, even if you're uncomfortable, even if you are fearful. I think life rewards people who make a habit out of being uncomfortable. And that's what
mm.
we're talking about basically is that you're going to flop. You're not going to have confidence. So if you don't have confidence, you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Um, and I think of every time I get uncomfortable in a situation, it benefits my life and probably my bank account too. So, um,
But
Yeah.
that's actually a conversation we just had with our son yesterday. Our
Yeah.
16-year-old is like, okay, just wandering through life aimlessly, being a young boy or a young girl, it's like, do something, be confident in what you're doing, just do something, do anything that's going to benefit you. Literally, we just had that
right,
conversation.
right.
Yeah.
It's a barrier that has to be broken, and it's unfortunately that there's a lot of it's like smoke. You
Mm.
can't see through it to know that there's good stuff on the other side. You just see the smoke, so you don't want to get it. You don't
Mm.
want nobody wants to be uncomfortable. But if you can understand that, it helps you to understand that well, wait a minute, man. The last time I did this, it worked out pretty good eventually, and then it worked out, and that's where the confidence, and then of course the experience.
Mm.
And I think that is, yeah, man, it's probably one of the single most valuable things that anybody could learn to just come to terms with that. Probably the quicker you come to terms with that, the better. The faster you will accelerate your life. The faster you'll develop skills and you'll advance your career and whatever your goals are, really. So, if you never got uncomfortable and asked the girl to dance, you may never find a future part. So
Mm.
there's an unlimited number of scenarios where avoiding that has negative consequences.
Is that, I mean, really important from that perspective to be teaching guys that, failure is okay? I look at it, I use my son as an example when he was first doing karate. And he wasn't doing some of the study he needed to do. And I could have sit there and forced him to study, but I made a conscious decision. I said, I'm gonna let you fail this. You're gonna go to the exam and you're gonna fail. I can see it, and I'm gonna let you do that. And everyone else passed, and he failed. And then I asked him how it felt. He wasn't happy about that. And but do we need to be having those conversations with guys? I mean, when we talk about there's a lot of participation trophies out there, and even though they don't, I mean, you still, it doesn't matter what if you're playing soccer, or for the people in Europe, football, but you and I, we have different footballs in our countries. But where any of those sports where you can score, unless you completely change the structure, but people are scoring anyway, whether you don't score or not. Do we need to take some of that away and actually go, hey, losing is part of life. It's about especially for guys, get up and give it another go.
Yeah, it creates it's a valuable life lesson, and I think that there's an important problem solving that you're never going to cultivate or develop that if you never have a problem. If you just keep ducking the problem, then how do you cultivate that problem solving ability? You just quit every time the going gets tough, or you've been sheltered from it, which is probably even worse, because then you're delusional that these things just don't even exist.
Yeah. I love that. That's sorry, I lost it then because it was like that's such a blinding flash of the obvious. How are you going to develop solving skills if you've never faced a problem? That just encapsulates this whole participation trophy mentality. It's taking away that ability to solve a problem of, hey, yeah, you lost. Yeah, you're gonna, that doesn't make you a less worthwhile person, but maybe you need to
Yeah,
improve your skill a little bit.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah,
Correct course.
I love that. That's awesome. What about sorry, I had a mental blank then. I got lost. Where am I going with this? So from that, if we were to, from it seems to me that we really, and I love you to talk about, this honor and respect and doing the right thing. Is that really the fundamentals of what the framework needs to be for what is manly? It's not about, it certainly has shifted. I haven't met anyone that's said manly is this, and I'm sure there are those that I haven't met, but that manly is this macho. The best definition I heard of macho is someone that has a vasectomy and then jogs home. That's macho. But
Right,
but
macho, I think, teeters on facade,
yeah,
right? And it's okay to use that.
mm,
That I think the Latins call it
but
machismo, right? It's okay to use that as a kind of like a pretend to
mm,
carry you. If you lack the confidence and you are fearful, it's okay to use that machismo
mm,
to propel you.
yeah,
It's a pretend. And I quote Cary Grant. He said that I pretended to be somebody else until I was that person. Um,
mm.
and so, does that mean he lived a lie his whole life? No, of course not. He's trying to tell you that I acted more confident than I was, and then eventually I was the Cary Grant that everybody knew.
Well, that's what
Um,
Napoleon Hill writes about in Think and Grow Rich. Visualize, be that person, and whatever that is, and then you'll become that.
so that so let me circle back to the value. So the value, it sounds incredibly simplistic,
Mm,
but I think that's in that simplicity, that's where the brilliance is that it doesn't have to be much more complicated. That if you just kind of walk that out, um,
mm.
it'll grow.
And is it a case where we need, like you said, with your son, and I do the same with mine, is just get out there and do something. You rather than just sitting there, have a purpose. And it doesn't have to be the end ultimate purpose you can have for the rest of your life. That can change, but do something that's contributing to the world.
Yeah, I used an example yesterday. It was a business example for our son, our 16-year-old. He overheard us having a conversation with a widow and just the business talk and how we could help her with some legal stuff. But
Mm,
the way that I was able to relate to her, and we ended up. I mean, we made a connection. I made a connection with this lady. After I got off the phone, I showed my son, like, hey, this is our purpose. This is what we're doing in our business, so we can make a difference in other people's lives by helping them and being there for them and enriching their lives. You don't have to make a big career choice at this moment in your life at 16, but do something that's going
mm,
to benefit somebody else, because the more you realize you're benefiting somebody else, you're going to get more back in your life. You're going to be benefited from
Mhm.
that. It's going to be, the more you pour into somebody else, the more fulfilled you will be. So,
mm.
we really, really talk about those values, and it's just really important. I think those are just real life things we need to be talking about with our sons for sure.
And is that, I mean, and there's two topics from that I want to touch on. Is one, having that experience of your son being aware of that, and I consciously do that a lot with my son. There's times where I took him to a board meeting that I went to last week before, and I'm pretty sure he was bored, but he got the experience of being there. And seeing what I was doing, and similar sort of thing. Right now while we're doing this podcast, he's actually like 2-3 meters away. He's got his earphones in, but I know he can hear me. And I don't have earphones on, so he can hear what's going on. And I love that you talked about your son doing that. But the other thing I wanted to add to that was because it was brought up by another lady that, yes, because we always talk about men having a male role model, but what about the female role model? Is that as equally important?
I think it brings into perspective that balance. You can find yourself in the position of Andrew Tate, who probably doesn't have a mommy that loves him. That's my thought, anyway. That's probably some of the problem. Is there's probably some mommy issues.
Yeah.
And so that's just part of that whole balance. That there's a female role model, a mother figure, same thing. To deny that is a valuable part of development would be foolish.
Yeah. If we were going to sum, because we've talked for a while now, we've been here. If you were to sum it up,
covered everything. Yeah, we circled back to Andrew Tate.
Exactly. If we were to sum it up, what do you think would be, where would it be? What would you say would be the key parts of this framework for what is manly?
I would say go watch Roadhouse. I was thinking about that while we were talking. I'm like, we need to put in there some violence and
Sorry, you've lost your sound again.
Scantily clad women. I think I need to have my sons watch it and just kind of like watch how he acts, watch how he treats people with respect, but he doesn't take any bull crap. He's intellectual, but he's in touch with what women need. I think there's a lesson there. Actually, maybe that's why I like watching it. I don't know. I'm still trying to learn something myself. But so what? I went off on a tangent there.
Yeah,
I love that you went to the intellectual part, because it was something I don't think we covered in this, and because the research shows that it's less than 40% of men actually get higher education now, and I was reading some reports now this year, 2023, for those that look back in history, in 100 years, when you look at this and go, this is where this started. They're actually, when you look at equality of numbers in the workforce, in higher educated positions, the compass is flipped now, where they're struggling to find men to fill those roles because the men aren't there. They haven't done the education. How do we fix that? I mean, is that something you've seen as well, where the men aren't getting those higher education, which relates to another problem you mentioned about, educated women generally don't date guys that aren't educated.
Right.
Well, I almost want to say it's generational still. Like, I want to come back to like this generational thing. Like, the 50s it was traditional. The 60s, every era has been different. But I want to say this younger generation kind of feels like they don't have to work. They don't have to get the education.
Right. I think they're limited by some sense of entitlement. There's probably an issue there.
The women have become so overbearing that they feel like they don't have to stand up and be manly. And so they just kind of take a back seat. And I don't agree with that. I mean, again, manly to me, and what I want to instill in my boys is, again, by whatever your whoever you are innately. I'm not saying go be a brain surgeon, when you're not capable of that, but whoever you are innately, go out and do that to the best of your abilities. Be a good person, do the right things, love whoever you're with, be honorable and faithful. Those are just, I mean, am I wrong? Those just feel.
So simplistic in nature, but that's the brilliance of it all, is that
it never really hasn't changed. I feel like the basis of everything has kind of always remained the same. We've tried to like go over and above or be or below in certain ways. And it's just not working because it's
Mm.
creating these really lazy, um, feminine men that
Wallies, I call them. They're like the Wally, the Disney movie where they're out this kind of sitting around.
that's not manly. I will say that in a woman's perspective, that is not manly. And women do not want a man who's not willing to step up. If you,
Mm.
if you have to step up for your family, step up for your family. The man and the woman can do that, but a man that's willing to do that, whether that's intellectually or physically in a situation, that's what's manly. That's what I find
Mm.
manly.
Well, if you put that in perspective, taking a popular figure at the moment, if you were to look at Jordan Peterson, you wouldn't, if you were just to physically look at him, he doesn't look like he could step up. But on an
Right.
intellectual level, he'll own most people quite
It's
comfortably.
amazing.
And that's where I think is that where we're looking at that this ability to step up is more. It's just about being in your right place, doing what's right for you. Because I don't see Jordan Peterson being out there saving the whales, so to speak. Maybe he
Yeah.
does, but but that's not his space. That's not his expertise. But is that really what is it about? It's about now we have all this freedom. You just need to, and kind of circling, I guess, back to what we're starting with, is do we need you need to choose what's right for you and do that, and the right people will be around you.
Ideally, yeah, ideally, I think that's ideally the way that works. As far as the higher education or the deficit of it, and I
Mm,
agree with what Grace said. There's an entitlement, um, and I think that if you are just trying to explore the best version of yourself, that should come naturally with that. I don't think that people should just run right out and jump into college if they don't really know what they want to do.
mm,
And they're just spinning their wheels, or just you're kind of directionless, but with a bill.
yeah.
But if you are laser focused on what you want to do, and you know that this is what you're gifted in, then you should do that.
Mm,
And that's that same thing. That's that internally driven. There's people who are they're driven by they know that they want to go be a doctor,
mm,
a lawyer, or any other number of things, and then they go and do it. So, and unfortunately, I think if you drove home that message that going out and adding value, going out and bettering yourself, the issue of higher learning and the deficit in that would
mm.
probably resolve itself too.
Is part of that the communication as well, where we need to be teaching guys? Women tend to do it innately. They have that communication ability, and I have that with the program. I have a negotiation program, which is used for high corporates, or large corporates, I should say. But the best negotiators actually come from a feminine model where it's more about empathy, it's more about listening, it's more about understanding, because when you do that, then you're in a better position to reach a mutually agreeable position. Is that something we need to be encouraging young boys and men? I mentioned earlier that make my son do some public speaking, do some creative writing to develop those skills.
Well, my favorite saying is read the room
Yeah.
with our boys. I'm like, just, open your eyes, read the room,
Mm,
read the situation. It's very important. I mean, as a woman that has gotten me, I can intuitively
yeah.
almost read the mind of another person
Mm,
just by being reading a room. But I think that that's something that can be taught as well. That can be a trait. Yeah, it comes more easy to a woman, but as a young boy, it can be taught as well. I can have my 6-year-old who's jumping off, literally jumping off, walls and couches, and have him sit down and focus on something and say, okay, we're going to learn to look at your sister. How is she feeling? If I wanted to do that, I can do that, and he can learn to do that. So I
mm.
think young boys are very, very capable of that, but that's extremely important to
Yeah,
learn.
yeah.
I lost you again,
And
Mark. I think back.
you can't bulldoze yourself into every situation or through every situation. So they have the ability, like you said, negotiate or finesse
Mm,
is a valuable skill. And I would say that's definitely something that, again, it's being in touch with a quote unquote feminine side, I suppose.
mm. Yeah, because I was just wondering from that side of things about, for being manly, is that because I remember hearing about Nelson Mandela, and apparently his dad was the chief of wherever they were. And when they got together and they had all the other leaders of the area, Nelson Mandela's dad would go around the room first, get everyone else to talk first, and he would talk last. And I remember too, and I'm not getting into American politics, but just as an example, um, what I understood when Barack Obama first met Putin in Russia, Putin talked for 55 minutes straight without Obama saying a single word, which that's impressive in my mind. It's like someone that can, because most people, we're immediately thinking what we're going to say next. But again, I was just wondering from a what is manly perspective, do we need to be teaching some of these traits of, this empathy, like you said, reading the room, being able to read the room?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's, it's this, I think the way to relate that to, to young men is that is not to not that, oh, it's a feminine trait, but it's a part of your skill set. So like, for example, uh, Obama and Putin. Putin impresses me as kind of the Andrew Tate of Russia, probably. But I don't know him that well. But he's probably full of himself.
Mm,
And Obama was using chess moves. So
mm,
while it's easy for me to say, oh, Obama's effeminate, I can
yeah.
say that and laugh about it. But it's a chess play. It's you
Mm,
showed your hand, and now I'm going to crown me. So
yes.
and I think if you paint that scenario just that way, I think it's easier. It's more palatable for men
Mm,
to understand it that way.
And I'd
yeah.
say for the hope of women and for the hope of, young girls, we're invested, we have young girls as well. My hope is that, men are teaching young boys how to relate more and to be, empathize more, just not for my sake and my relationship only, but for the sake of my girls, growing
Mm,
up, and for the men that they will eventually meet and marry. I would love that to be instilled in these young boys, just respect and honor, and just an understanding. And even though Andrew Tate said, women are really complicated and hard to understand, that's true. We are. We got a million things going on in our brains at all time, but it really boils down to being loved and cherished and
mm.
respected and protected.
Well, it's an interesting point too, because when you talk about that, if you read Mars and Venus as well, I mean, guys, we're Mr. Fix-It. So when you talk to us, but we just need to shut up and listen. It's like we don't need to solve the problem. The solving the problem is actually just listening. I know I was teaching this without even realizing what I was teaching. So I have it as part of a negotiation course for corporates, which is an expensive course for them. But the most powerful, we have sources of power for negotiation. And two most powerful sources are: one, shut up, just listen, and two, actually listen, ask questions and listen. Because that gives you information, and information has power. The school I went to, the motto was "Knowledge is power." Um, and it's just wondering whether, from that perspective, we need to switch that up. And Mark, I'm probably going to hit another chord here with you, Mark. You might remember a cartoon about a really a young prince that would go to it in Eternia, would pull out his sword and say, "I have the power."
Mm-hmm.
But from that, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to
Oh,
say, because
I was just
with,
going to
with
play on that.
yeah with He-Man, when they did that, it was actually a marketing play. They actually studied young boys, and found that they were talking about they were wanting the power because they had the mum telling them what to do. They wanted power. So that's where the line came from. They actually created the show around a psychological aspect that they knew young boys would connect to. And then the character came out of that's why it was so huge. It was ridiculously huge because it reflected I have the power. But is that, I
Makes
mean,
sense.
yeah, and it became massively successful. But with that, from that side of things, is that the conversations that we need to be having with the boys? And hey, some of these so-called softer skills are actually very, very powerful skills. They might not be, this upfront, but they're actually much, much more powerful. And usually, I mean, because if you look at the different, because commonly it's the alpha male that gets all the attention, but it's the sigma male that actually has all the power.
Right. That's that's a very salient point too. I wish that some of those, negotiating skills, like that, or discover the ability to, discover things. I wish I would have had that, as a younger man for sure. I can remember wanting certain jobs and charging on in there, and you know, good, that's the getting uncomfortable part. But then when I wasn't getting what I wanted out of that job, or I wasn't being hired or being promoted, uh, probably the right way to have done that would have been with discovery, would have been with the ability to take myself out of the picture and find out more information rather than just making demands, like an adolescent. So,
Petulant.
yeah.
I haven't done that. Not. And that's where I was wondering from that perspective of this, what is manly, and young boys. It's teaching that balance of going, hey, bit of well, coming back to that honor and respect that you mentioned. It's okay. Let's address this in a respectful way. And part of that respect is listening. Going, well, hang on a minute. Maybe I'm not seeing the full picture here. Maybe I need to listen a bit more. Maybe I need to ask a few more questions. And that is powerful to do that.
Yeah, I think I try my best to drop these little nuggets onto our boys, like, hey, in respect to a man and a woman in relationship, but also to life too, in respect to that, where if you just stop and you just listen and pay attention, you're going to go so much further, or in a relationship, in a marriage, like, do what's right, just I really try to instill that. And like Mark said, I don't know that he got that a lot growing up. I know that we've talked about his childhood, and maybe he didn't get that as much, but it's all really a learning curve. If we want that for our children, then we need to be teaching that to our children, where it was a lack thereof growing up. So it's important stuff.
Yeah, and that's why we're having these conversations and recording them, so we can share them with other people as well to get that knowledge out there, which I think it seems to be that what we need to be doing is just sharing that information. It seems to be, I think this woman that yelled at a man for opening the door is an urban myth from what I'm gathering, because I've never heard it. So I've heard people talk about it, but I've never heard of anyone that's actually experienced it. So I'm just wondering whether whether we need to have those, like more of these conversations where we're talking about, especially guys, to understand that that girls do want guys to be a gentleman. They do want him to be able to stand up when need to be, and that's okay. Just do it respectfully and with honor.
Yeah,
Yep.
I have actually heard of something now that you mentioned that. So there's this big wave of like on TikTok and social media where men or young men are not paying the bill. And thoughts on that? I don't know if you've heard. So it's kind of like that, but it's this new wave of young men. They refuse to pay the bill, like when they take a date out to dinner. And this whole thing, it's kind of like a craze, like, well, how is the girl going to react? And is that right? What do you think? And it's so kind of crazy to me, because it kind of, yeah, we can pay the bill. Of course we can pay the bill. And maybe we will say, no, we want to pay the bill. But to just sit back and to take a position of, I'm just not going to do it, to just let her go ahead and take that role, I think is really crappy.
Not advancing the cause any, no.
I'm and I was single for a long time, and I'm thinking, guys, you really haven't thought that one through, because if you're thinking about later on in the evening, you're probably going to be missing out on certain stuff if if you're taking this attitude.
That's childish. I don't know. Hopefully that's just a trend.
I hope it's just a trend. I don't know.
And that's where I wonder, from that perspective, is it a case of, and I'll shoot this to you in the email, that with that article that was in the newspaper at the start of the year going, Andrew Tate's got hold of all these young men, and then actually show you the research. I'll send you the article and research, and they don't correlate. And I'm just wondering whether it is just a bit of hype, that it is the minority that are doing it, and it's a bit of hype, and the majority are not really paying attention because they're too busy getting on with their life.
It's probably always the case. That's probably always the case. I think that media in general, they thrive on hype. So, try to make things always seem worse than they really are. So,
is that the conversations we need to be having? I know, because I have that conversation with my son all the time, and he actually doesn't use, when we go out a number of times, and he doesn't take his phone. Sometimes I say, you forgot your phone. He goes, I don't need it. So it's, well, maybe he's an alien. Could be.
Yeah, no, that in itself is a whole nother conversation, but it's something that we've definitely experienced and realized that that's something that we need to limit as well, just because it detracts from real life, I think. You can't learn everything from YouTube. You can learn a lot from YouTube, but you can't learn everything from it. You have to learn everything in the real world. YouTube's not going to change your flat tire.
Or get you a date.
Yeah. So I think that, and we've done that, we're incorporating that, we're limiting that stuff because it has the propensity to cultivate laziness. So.
Yeah, I always found it funny. I mean, the couple of parents that I've heard complain about their children, and they're using mobile phones all the time. While they were complaining to me about their children using phones all the time, they were texting or doing something or on their mobile phone. I was going, who's setting the example here? But we talked about being a home example, so I think we covered that topic. We were summarizing it up, but I think we have, in that sense, summarized it, and a lot of it is to do with this respect, honor, doing the right thing. You said you intrinsically what the right thing is, but it's having the backbone to stand up and do that. That seems to be where that framework is. Is there any more you'd like to add to that, of putting it in a nutshell?
That's it. Anything you want to add? I think that's that's our take on it. That's what the world looks like from Central Florida.
Grace, yeah.
Yeah, that's how we live our lives. I mean, again, it's not everybody's cup of tea, and everybody's going to see it differently. There's different values and morals all over the world, but I think if you just keep it really simple, like Mark keeps saying, I mean, it's so simple, it's almost stupid simple, just those moral values, you can't really go wrong. How can you go wrong? People may not like you. People may think you're wimpy or you're not as manly. That's fine, but just stay true to yourself. Who cares? So I tell my kids, who cares? Just be yourself, do what's right, and then who cares what anybody else thinks?
Yeah, I love that. Be yourself, do what's right for you. Yeah, I love that. Grace, Mark, it has been such a pleasure having you on the show. Mark, great catching up with you. We're going to have to do a virtual Roadhouse watching together, I think. But
I think so, yeah.
With your teenage son, with the teenage sons.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll have to do that. Oh, well, wait, so we're coming to New York, most likely, so maybe we'll catch up. You're in Florida, so it's not too far away. We can, we'll work something out. And again, thank you for being on the show. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks, Damian. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for being part of the Share.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes for others and for you.